Hey fellow investors, welcome to this part 2 of the most underrated dividend growers you can find on the market. So last week I explained that one of my friends was looking for a replacement for BCE. He sold his shares of that struggling company, now looking for a high single to double digit dividend grower, and he wanted to have some kind of like good ideas. So last week we covered position 9 to 5. Today we are looking at my 4 favorite dividend growers that are not your typical Alimentation Couche-Tard or Microsoft type of thing. So let's get started right now with Jamieson Wellness, JWEL.TO. And if you're looking for all the tickers, they're going to be in the link description as well. As you can see, a company that has started to trade in 2017, so a relatively young dividend grower. The revenue keeps on going up like there's no tomorrow, but there is something with the earnings. We're going to talk about that in a second, but for now, just look at the dividend triangle where the dividend growth keeps on going up. The company is on a strong recovery path right now after being on the hype because they are selling vitamins and other supplements, which is great for health. And of course, in 2020, that was the talk of the year. So among their growth vectors, they focus on the aging population that will need to buy more vitamins and other supplements. There are more information that is being also forwarded to the population, so they know how important it is to keep in shape and to make sure that they eat the right stuff for them. And of course, they have invested a lot in international markets as emerging markets have a higher disposable income than before. So they will start to get a little bit more interested in buying vitamins and supplements. So they started the business in Canada with about 50% of their revenue now, and then they are growing through acquisition in the US with Youtheory and also in China and international markets. So the company is in full growth mode and it intends to spend a lot into marketing and other promotions, which is earning their earnings per share. And if you go back to the dividend triangle for a second, you will see that as the revenue keeps on growing, the earnings per share stagnates and even is on a slowdown. So the key here moving forward will be to track how they can become more profitable without hurting sales growth. The other downside of Jamieson Wellness, unfortunately, it is a small cap, which means that you are in for a roller coaster if you invest in this type of business. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. This is the type of business that is not for the faint of heart. So now moving on to the third favorite underrated dividend grower, Bank OZK. So ticker OZK. You know me, I'm a big fan of Canadian banks, but if you have one regional US bank to buy, probably that Bank OZK should be on your list. As you can see in the dividend triangle, the dividend is increasing every single quarter. That's kind of crazy, right? So while most banks or most stocks will increase their dividend once a year, and they will pay it quarterly, this one is increasing it by 1 penny every quarter. So the dividend grows very quickly. And as you can see, besides the moment where they had to increase their provision for credit losses during the pandemic, revenue and earnings are growing really, really fast. So of course, the name of the game for this company is how fast they can grow their loan book. It is making just classic banking activities with mortgages and loans. So they focus on the higher interest rate they can charge now that interest rates are a little bit higher. And of course, you're going to think, but Mike, what's going to happen now that interest rates are about to be cut? Is Bank OZK going to be into problem? Well, probably not, because their secret weapon is behind the loan book growth. It is called the RESG department. What's the RESG? Well, it stands for Real Estate Specialty Group. So they specialize into projects where they do land and property development. What is great about this one is those are like large projects, highly complicated. They do a lot of business in New York and in Florida for this. And as you can see on this graph, they will go from multifamily to offices, condos, industrials, just lands and hotels. but they focus on the loan to cost or loan to value ratio. In other words, if the project is worth 100 million, they will likely just finance 45, 50 million out of it. So they want to make sure that they have first lien on the project and they have clients that will bring in a lot of cash flow up front just to ensure the security of the project. So of course, the downside for a company like JWEL.TO is while the RESG group is a huge engine behind their growth, it could be a big problem. So if you go back on the dividend triangle to look at the stock price, you can see that between 2018 and 2019, there was a huge drop towards the end of the year. That was created by a commotion because at that time, they had to write off a huge loan. So by dealing business with big clients that have big projects, when there's one that falls, it hurts a lot for their balance sheet. So back then it created a lot of concern. They were able to show that it was just a one-time off, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen again. So while the RESG group is really exciting and sexy business, you have to be very careful. This is not the type of stock that I would have a large position in just for that reason. So now we're ready to move into my favorite top 2 underrated dividend growers that are in my portfolio. Just before that, I want you to download the Dividend Income for Life guide that teaches you exactly the methodology that you can use to find companies like this. So companies with a robust balance sheet, with a thriving dividend triangle, and with a business model that has a lot of chances to grow moving forward. Of course, those are based with low yield and high dividend growth perspective, but they are safer for your retirement as well. I know a lot of income-seeking investors, they're thinking, I need 5, 6, 7% yield in my portfolio so I can retire stress-free. Well, actually, those stocks are quite risky. Instead, go for quality instead of high yield, and you will sleep a lot better at night. So you can download the Dividend Income for Life guide right there in the link description below at dividendstocks.com/income. Now moving on to one of my favorite stock in my portfolio these days, CCL Industries. So the ticker is CCL.B.TO. And as you can see on the dividend triangle, the stock price have moved up and down, but it was pretty much dead money between 2018 and 2024. But then all of a sudden, the company is back on track, back alive, and generating a lot of profit for their shareholders. We can see that the revenue during that time was actually quite stable and always a little bit increasing because they grow organically, but also through acquisitions. And the earnings per share also followed a similar pattern. Now, for the dividend, this company has been a long-term dividend grower, offering generous increases every single year. What's fascinating about CCL Industries is they are flying under the radar because you are buying their products without even knowing that you're doing this. So as you can see here, CCL Industries is making packaging for a lot of major brands that you know, such as Procter & Gamble, Heineken, Coca-Cola, HP, Walmart. They are everywhere. They count several different industries, several different clients, and this is part of what the business model is so special about. Since they are doing packaging and labels, those are all based on repetitive purchases. Most of the business, 61% coming from CCL products, which is the specialty packaging business. And then you have 16% for Avery, which is making all the labels. And then Checkpoints and Innovia, they focus on banknotes and also RFID. So all those labels, like those barcodes that you can track for multiple products and boxes in the transportation. On top of serving multiple industries, they are also present across the world. So they have about 43% 53% of their sales made in North America, but they have great exposure to Europe and also emerging market with 29 and 28% each. So now you're going to tell me, but Mike, what's the problem with this one, right? What's the downside? Well, unfortunately, the downside is the raw material cost. So CCL Industries, if you look at its sectors, it will be classified under the material sector and not into consumer discretionary or consumer staples. Even though they will follow those cyclical of product sales, their major challenge is the cost of raw material. So whenever this goes up in the packaging business and also in the label business, it's going to be very tough for them to maintain the same margin. So that's why sometimes you see that the revenues are going up, but the earnings are stagnating. The other risk that I see for CCL is, of course, since they grow by acquisitions, every single time that you integrate a new business in your model, well, there are costs involved, there are uncertainties involved, and maybe you're paying too much for your newest acquisition. So now we're going to end up this video with one of the recent purchases I've made about a year ago, LeMaitre Vascular, LMAT. Again, it's a small cap, so I have to put that into big warning sign. The stock price could go up and down rapidly, but as you can see on the dividend triangle right now, this company is in growth mode most of the time. So the revenue over the past 10 years has always been growing besides the pandemic. The earnings are growing very fast these days, and of course, it is a very generous dividend grower. Did I mention the price? I didn't, right? So the price is skyrocketing these days, but I think there's still a lot of room to grow. The key point for LeMaitre Vascular here is they focus to be number one or number two in niche markets. So they do not try to sell everything to everybody, but instead focusing mostly on surgeons, selling scalpels and other equipment that is very niche to their needs. What is great there is, well, when you're number one or number two, you benefit from a strong relationship with hospitals. And of course, hospitals have other things to do to try to just change their suppliers every single quarter. So they build sticky relationship. They invest massively in their representatives to make sure that they boost their sales and they are present all the time. And by selling high quality products, they can grow their business every year. On top of this organic growth tailwind, they also benefit from growing by acquisitions. They made 24 acquisitions in the past 26 years. And the best part of that, they always finance it with their own cash flow. So this company, even though it's a small cap, has $0 in debt. The downside though, even though it seems very perfect, is, well, the first one is, of course, as you can see on this chart, they made a lot of acquisitions that were on the winning side, making more revenue and making more profit, but they also made bad acquisition. 8 of those were actually failures. I cannot stress that enough, that when you're making acquisitions, there's always a risk. There's a risk of cash flow, there's a risk of the price you pay, and the risk of integration. And sometimes you're just making the bad bet. You create a hole in your balance sheet instead of pushing the business forward. The second risk I see is, since it's a small business, it can face steep competition. So if any of the big healthcare guys decides to go head to head against LeMaitre Vascular, maybe they're going to lose, and that could be terrible for the business. So in the meantime, they're super happy in their niche market, but maybe that at one point the potential for growth will be limited. So in summary, for those 4 great underrated stocks, they have a lot of things in common. First, they have a lot of growth vectors. Second, they have a robust dividend triangle. But third, they also have some risk that comes with them. So I urge you to do your due diligence, not to take those as buy or sell recommendation, and instead do your own work, because it's really important to know what you own and why you own it. All right, guys, that's enough for today. Make sure that you like this video and subscribe to the channel not to miss my next video on next Thursday. And until the next time,